Welcome back. It's great to have you here on another Conversations with Cabral, where today I am interviewing Ashley Stahl. Ashley Stahl went from a counterterrorism expert to now a world-renowned career coach. A pretty amazing transition, and we get to hear that backstory as to how it started. Plus, we get deep into the tips today on discovering which one of your core skill sets you have that comes naturally to you and why it should be your default on when looking for your purpose and your passion in life. Ashley goes into why sometimes we get confused between interests and passions, how to differentiate between the two, and why knowing your core skill set will allow you to be happier in life. And again, we go through all 10 of those as well. We also talk about how to do a better self-audit and answering the question as to what do you know that you wish you didn't about yourself. So pretty amazing and fascinating podcast. I really love having experts on in any field. And so Ashley is someone that is, again, in the self-improvement and career coaching based space. I think all of us can use a little self-improvement in our lives. And so that's why I love being able to bring on experts like Ashley. Enjoy the show and let both of us know what you thought. Take care.
Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. Great to be here with you today. Excited to share with you our special guest of the week, Ashley Stahl. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
It's great to have you. Once I was introduced to you and introduced to your work, and I started to read through your bio to see if you were a good fit for our audience, I read that you were a counterterrorism professional turned highly sought after career coach. And I said, well, this has to be an interesting story. So I would love to start there and learn a bit more about how you went from probably one of the most high stress jobs that you could have in Washington, D.C. to now being able to help people really develop their passion and true career path for them.
It's so interesting that you call it high stress. I know that since you have a medical background, that's what lens you're looking at. It's right. Fun to hear that because most people look at it as very fascinating and they forget the level of stress. And I think that you have to be someone that's able to live under stress, and getting to know yourself is such a process. And it's like we make career choices in different moments in our life without even realizing we're making them, especially when we have high impact moments, whether we see something traumatic that really affects us and leads us to wanting to make a career decision. But in my case, I grew up in a house where the news was always on. And from a really young age, my dad was always fighting politics at the table with my uncles. And so for better or for worse, I kind of developed a political opinion. And by the time I got to college, the millennial generation, we were really impacted by 9/11. I think anyone who grew up during that era can tell you where they were standing in the moment that those towers went down. And I had family on the East Coast, so I watched my mom scrambling, making phone calls, trying to make sure that everybody was okay. And that really stuck with me. And that is an example of what I was referencing, of a high impact moment that really makes you choose something in your career. And I think what's most important and what my work is about is helping people develop awareness around those moments. Because if you don't notice those moments, sometimes you draw conclusions that may not be truly a fit for you. So in my case, I just made a commitment in that moment and was like, I'm interested in government. I went to the career services office in college, like so many people, and was like, what do I major in? And I heard all of the bland directives, like follow your passion, do what you love, and the money is going to follow. I heard it all. And I really started to learn like that's just a treadmill to nowhere for me. I think your passion matters, but what matters more is where you're naturally gifted. This is the real premise of the work that I do as a career expert. And whether I had an interest in counterterrorism or not, and clearly I did, there's also a big difference between an interest and a passion. And I think a lot of people give their interest an undue upgrade. or promotion into treating it like a passion. And the thing about interests is that they exist in the backdrop of your life somewhere, somehow, whereas passions, they keep you really going. And yet, I learned going into counterterrorism and giving everything to that career path that there was such a big difference between being a consumer, someone who loves consuming politics, and being a producer, someone who works in it. Like, I love cupcakes, would be a horrible baker. So these sorts of things I didn't realize until later, but I gave everything in myself to that career path. I studied the best master's program I could. I triple majored in government history and French. I learned Arabic at UCLA, and I was ready. And then, of course, like everyone who's a millennial, I graduated and ran off the cliff of the recession in 2008 and was on my parents' couch applying for jobs, ended up being an underpaid admin assistant, making minimum wage, and just thinking to myself, like, I have this vision. And so I was able to ask my university, do you have a list of alumni and that moved to DC? And they sent me a list of 2,000 names. And I cold called every single person in DC, which is like a whole different level of cold calling because they all work in counterterrorism. Like, they're the last people that want your cold call even more because it's so private. And I probably got out of those 2,000 people over 4 months, maybe 100 helping me. And I fell on my face. And that was when I got 3 job offers. I went from this underpaid admin assistant to an executive as a defense contractor running a really important program for the Pentagon. And all of these concepts that I was sharing really became present for me around consumption versus production, around skill set versus interest. And I didn't have the words to put to it now, that I do now as a career expert. At the time, I just felt like this isn't working. And I'm so grateful now that, I started helping friends get job offers. I was so good at getting job offers after working through that list of 2,000 people and cold calling. And people would come to me all the time and they'd say, you should be a career coach. I didn't even know what that was. I was like a hockey coach, like on the sidelines of your career. Like, what does that even mean? And then eventually I started this business. And I think that's really the message that I would have for anybody listening is when you follow what feels right, and I talk about this a lot, even if you can't explain it, even if it doesn't feel like your forever choice, what happens is it puts you in the current of operating out of a gift you have or out of who you are. And on the sidelines of that, other opportunities tend to come up because people notice when you're in your zone. And so I think that's what happened for me was I had a lot of gifts that I brought to the Pentagon. I wasn't the best analysis focused person. And I still did a great job in my job, but I knew it wasn't for me. And on the sidelines, that was where I learned how to be a career expert, help people with their job hunt. I started small, and now 10 years later, I've got my podcast, my book, and all of the things.
It's amazing. We're definitely going to get into all of those things. And I want to return back to those 100 people, being able to help you as well. But first, I'd like to learn about, so, you grew up doing your undergrad and your triple major, and then you went for your master's degree or the post grad work. And at some point, though, you're like, okay, I'm all in, and you get the job in DC, and you kind of leave everything to go down there. So to me, from an outsider, like, wow, this person's really passionate about this. So at what moment do you say to yourself, oh, this isn't a passion of mine. This is maybe just something that was thrust upon me or I was interested in, or maybe because of family, I thought that this was supposed to be what I was going to do. So tell me a little bit about that, because you've invested your entire 22, 23 years of life into this. And now all of a sudden you're not doing it anymore. Like, yeah, what's the process that goes on there?
Well, isn't the theory of sunken costs such a real phenomenon for so many people? And yet it will never cease to surprise me how much people are willing to let a paycheck or 5 years of medical school or whatever it is they do, no matter how much money it is, they'll say it's too late. But it's like, if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it's not too late. The retirement age is increasing. And I have had people in my practice that have had 5 different careers that lasted 10 years each. And I think there's a narrative in society around starting over that simply isn't true. And the only difference between the people who aren't necessarily starting over when they make a pivot and the people who do is really their mindset. Because the people who decide that it is a start over, they start applying that belief, triggers them to apply for things that are much beyond their skill grade. And they force themselves into a self-fulfilling prophecy of a start over. In my case, I deeply believe that the skills you've been using your whole life are in some way relevant to where you're going in the future. And I think your job in your career and in your own fulfillment is to remember the best jobs and opportunities and businesses aren't happening for the best candidates. They're happening for the best communicators. They're happening for the people who know human connection. Because what is job hunting? It's connecting with people and then getting a more important meeting, an interview, and then more deeply connecting with people. And your resume got you in the door. Everybody's resume got them in the door. And the thing that makes you stand out is how you communicate about yourself. And so for me, I think there's not enough job seekers doing the legwork of really drawing the tie of where they've been in the past and making sense of it for that one skill they super need in the future. And so I put that onus on me when I made that pivot. And absolutely the dialogue of how much money I spent on graduate school, how many years I spent learning the Dari, the language spoken in Afghanistan. I was on an Afghanistan-focused program. The amount of years I spent trying to crack the code on Arabic because I am an awful Arabic speaker compared to other languages. I think I got an ego being fluent in French growing up, thinking like, language is easy for me. Not so much. But I poured myself into it. I bled for this career path. And so I totally understand. But my question for anyone is this: how long really do you have left in your career? Are you planning on retiring in the next 3 to 5 years? If not, I just wouldn't understand why you would choose to keep growing a career that you don't want. And I think a lot of people, we are wired to grow, right? We're wired to procreate. We want to grow in ourselves through procreating. I'm sure you could tell me way more about that. But we are wired, if we have a business, to want it to get bigger. We're in a society of more and more and more. And sometimes I've learned in careers, especially coaching hundreds and even thousands of people in my courses, so beyond one-on-one, is the amount of holding on to a plan for the sake of having one so that you can say at a dinner party, what you do for a living and feel safe with that. I just think the human ego there's almost nothing more powerful than somebody's desire to have an identity. And even if I asked you, like if I removed the title of doctor or partner or, whatever these titles are that you identify as, it's intimidating to walk into a room if we weren't allowed to identify as any of these things. Because it makes us be seen as who we are, just people. And people are afraid of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the feeling of not being enough, or hiding behind whatever title it might be. And I think that there's real issues. I just would say with family pressure as well, especially if, let's say, parents helped you out a little bit with college, or making those interest payments or whatever it might be, and you're supposed to become something. That's something that that your parents want, or grandparents, or family, or whatever it might be. But also, there's just the massive amount of student loan debt now. So you just have to get this job to start making those payments when they start 60 days or 90 days from when you graduate. I remember the last couple of weeks of undergrad, we all got brought into an auditorium and they explained how student loans were actually going to be paid now. I'm like, well, maybe I should have learned this before I even went to decide if I wanted to spend whatever it was. I think back in my day, it was around, maybe $40,000 a year for room and board. And, now it's $250,000, to go to a lot of these schools. And so now you have to get a job that's actually going to pay that, because now you have a mortgage basically before you even get a mortgage for a house. So I can understand how frustrating it can be. But as you were saying, at some point you need to bet on yourself, and you need to also want to enjoy life. And for me, I was doing what I loved, but I just wanted to take it to the next level. That's how I felt. It was the growth mindset. So I was 28, 29 years old when I started grad school. But it gave me also perspective. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And just like you said, I know that I'm going to be doing that for another 30, 40 years. So I have time. And then people have time, especially if it's a passion of theirs. So for people out there, at what point, like, what are the signs that, hey, they need to make this switch? Like, what do you see in your practice?
That's a great question. And I would add to that you are just in the really amazing minority. At any given moment, around 70% of the workforce is job hunting. And I would argue that they're not job hunting, or, we can even talk about entrepreneurs in their business, wanting to change their business, being tired of their business isn't working. So at any given time, most of us, according to the research, are hunting for something new. And I deeply believe that's not because we simply want something new, but because we're not job hunting or business hunting, we're clarity hunting. We're looking to see, will the next thing scratch the itch? And that's why when you don't have clarity, it puts you into this kind of trial and error energy. And that was really what my work was about in the book that I wrote, was how do I get people to understand their core skill set? Because that is what you carry with you throughout your career. My argument is, don't do what you love, do what you are, and figure out who you are. And that is very much so requiring an experimental mindset. I mean, what we're doing to ourselves right now is the equivalent of saying the first person you have a crush on, you need to marry them for life and it needs to be right. That's how we're treating our career path. Like, the first job you choose, you better grow that thing and make it really big in it and climb these ladders, when the first job to me for someone should be the experimental. What do you like? What do you not? And we have so much fear around losing time and people passing us by that we just keep growing things we don't want. And we perceive that we're making a step forward when really it's eventually going to come undone. Who you are truly is eventually going to win, and you're eventually going to have to make it come undone. So to answer your question around, like, where do you start, or what are the signs for someone who is kind of thinking like, maybe this isn't for me? I think the first thing is just an energy level thing. I know you work with a lot of people probably who are low on energy, and maybe they need to heal their gut, or, all of these different things that they have. But I do also find that even with somebody who's unhealthy, when they have purpose, their mentality often can override their physicality. And so I think a lot of people who are low on energy in their jobs are just low on purpose and low on connection. And so I would say, check with your energy. Like, are you tired because of some sort of physical ailment? Or are you tired because you're unstimulated? Like, I think about I just got a puppy. He's a German Shepherd. And if he's not stimulated for too long, like, he's going to rip our carpet up, and I think we're kind of all like him in some way or another with our own lives. And so I would say, number one is low energy. Number two is, if you're working in a core skill set that doesn't align with what your core skill set actually is. And this is a really big one. So in chapter 2 of my book, I outline, and I can even go through them here if you'd like, but 10 core skill sets that I really think are what exists in the workforce, whether you're a business owner or a job seeker. And when you're working outside of your primary core skill set a majority of the time, that to me is a very data-based, scientific way to kind of just look at it, look at you. And it's almost like math. Like, if this is your skill set and you're spending this % of time not in it, this job should not be a fit for you. And I think all of the 10 core skill sets that I have, they're like a flow chart. I mean, my core skill set is words, for example. And I'd be curious what yours is, because you're using many of them in your business. But mine is words. And so there's a lot of ways for me to be using words. I could be a writer. I could be a content strategist, an editor of a magazine, a salesperson, a business development professional, a real estate agent, a talent agent. I mean, the list goes on forever. And so it's not about saying this skill set means that I need to do this job. It's saying, this is how I need to express my gifts in the world. So let me start looking for all of the opportunities that allow me to do that. So I would say, if your energy is low and you're unstimulated and you're not working in your core skill set.
That's great. Yeah, I'd love for you to be able to go through those. I'd love to be able to try to figure out what my one is. And do people have like a 1A and 1B, or is it typically just that one? Stick with that and use that as your primary fuel for your gift.
Yeah. I love how you asked that, because I feel like most people will say, like, do you have people have a secondary one, but you're like very scientific. 1A, 1B.
Yeah, 1A, 1B. That's right.
That's great. Yeah, I would say most people will resonate with probably 3 of these. And what is still most important is really number 1. Like, what is your number 1? Because I would argue you should be spending 60 to 80% of your day in number 1. And then your secondary and tertiary one, it's fine if you want to put those into consideration. Usually entrepreneurs are harnessing all 3 more because they're creating their business based on their gifts. So that's naturally what will happen. But number 1 is innovation. So this is for the creative self-starter who is a problem solver. It is for the intrapreneur within a company, or the entrepreneur who is the visionary. And usually if you are within a company, you're rising in the ranks quickly because every entrepreneur needs that intrapreneur, that secondary person who gets it and is putting the level of excellence into the vision that they would. And that usually happens from an intrapreneur. One thing that I think is really important under this skill set is the question of whether you're supposed to be, in the workforce, as a job seeker or an entrepreneur. And I think one way to kind of answer that question is to ask yourself, what's your relationship to risk, financial risk? Do you feel a sense of inner safety around it? Or is it something that's kind of non-negotiable in your blood and in your belief system from your upbringing? And secondary, what's your relationship with freedom? Like, I find that most entrepreneurs need all levels of freedom. They need time freedom. They need creative freedom, versus a lot of intrapreneurs, maybe they don't need the creative freedom, meaning like somebody else has the idea, but it's enough inspiration for them to be the one that carries it out. Whereas an entrepreneur is going to say, why does it have to be this idea? Usually. I also think, there's freedom around time, and most people right now during the COVID era, we are getting flexibility. And most people who thought they needed to be an entrepreneur, most intrapreneurs actually just needed that basic flexibility, not the all-out freedom. So that's just a question to ask yourself. And core skill set number 2 is building. And I just want to remind anybody listening, these are really energies. It's not just the tactical, it's conceptual. So you could be quite literally a builder, like a construction worker, or you can be more of a metaphor, like building a website. But the energy you're in is one of piecing and adding and building. The third one's words. So we talked about my skill set. I'm wondering where this falls for you, because you definitely are harnessing them through your work. And most people will see their skill set directly tied to their bank account. And that's why people are not having fun when they're not using their core skill set, because not only are they tired, but they're probably not getting paid as well as they could if they really showed up where they're gifted. So most of my income is tied to words in some way. It's where I'm gifted. And a great question I think about for the word skill set that applies really to all of them is, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? And this is a really important question, because if I'm a words person and I'm an introvert, it is going to be so damaging for me to be a keynote speaker on stages all day long. I'm going to feel like a plug that just got pulled out of the wall if that is what I'm doing. And sometimes I have pushed myself, and my mom will say, like, who took the life out of you? And it's not because I'm in the wrong skill set. It's because I'm expressing it on an extroverted level too far in the extreme. So you really want to ask yourself, do I need to be residing within my core skill set internally, or do I need to be expressing it externally? That for me would look more like being a speaker versus being a writer. And I'm definitely a little bit more of a loner. So you're going to see me behind my laptop much more than you're going to see me on stage. Although I do keynotes, I sleep the whole next day. So just gives you some insight on that. And that's the key to a really miserable career. If people are upping the volume on a version of their skills that requires their energy to operate in a way that is not true for them. Number 4 is motion. These are the people on their feet. Believe it or not, I think that's a skill. It could be hairstylists. That could also be the beauty core skill set, which is another one I'll bring up. And that's actually a key point, is that these skill sets could work differently for people. So the fact that I am an author and a podcaster and words is my core skill set, and a coach, You could find a therapist, a psychologist who words is her core skill set. And the way she's going to heal people is through how she expresses herself. It's going to put words, like in the same way somebody who has an illness they don't understand and they spend years going to doctors to find the answer. A good therapist is going to be able to give them the gift of like what that diagnosis feels like. It's like putting words to people's pain in some way or another. However, there's another core skill set of analysis, and a psychologist could be under the analysis core skill set. And their gift is being able to recognize patterns in somebody and really treat them kind of with a more data-based mindset. And that's where they're going to be gifted in adding value. So it's important to understand that job titles aren't all necessarily pegged to each core skill set. You can kind of make some assumptions, but you can reside under different ones and still be brilliant in carrying them out with that core skill set. So we've got motion, the people on their feet, tour guides, fitness trainers, whatever that might be. And then we've got service. So the service people are the supporters, the helpers. And a question that comes up for me for all of them, but especially with this one is, are you a service person? Are you a helper? Or are you just a people pleaser that learned how to be a people pleaser at a young age? Very important question for any of these. Like, is this really who I am? Or is this just a bunch of trauma playing itself out? Like, am I just being the skill I learned how to be to survive in my family unit in some way? And it's not to say we don't all have wonderful family units, but we did learn to be someone in our family unit. So looking at that, especially with the service and helper and humanitarian core skill set, there's such a gift in being able to help and support people. Not everybody has that kind of ability to anticipate where somebody needs help them take action, support. The sixth core skill set is coordination. This one is not my skill set. So the project managers, the operations people, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, thank God for them. And then I mentioned number 7, which is analysis. So, that could be the intelligence analysis people, the economists, the researchers. You can tell here, for me, I was at the Pentagon and I took my intelligence focused job thinking, oh, I'm going to write intelligence reports. Like, I didn't even know, this body of work that I've come up with, obviously 10 years ago, but I remember thinking like, oh, I loved English class and writing, so this is going to be great for me. What I didn't realize was that was the analysis core skill set. These intelligence reports are not like a literary creative writing experience. Like, I'm more meant for a poetry class, not an intelligence report. But I misunderstood my core skill set at the time. And had I known this body of work that I go through in my book and even just here with you as an introduction, I probably would have said, oh, wow, this is actually an analysis job. Like, I'm not a fit for that. And I'm proud of the fact that I was probably A- in that job. And, for anybody listening, it's like, if you could be A- in the wrong core skill set, what do you think is possible when you're in the right one? So the 8th one is numbers, pretty straightforward, the number crunchers. And then number 9 is technology, also very straightforward, artificial intelligence creators. Thank God for the Genius Bar at the Apple store helping me fix my laptop with coffee all over it multiple times. And then number 10, I love this one, is beauty. And this one is really a matter of perspective. If you are a musician, a makeup artist, an interior designer, jewelry designer, you potentially would fit into this category. It just depends on what it means for you. But yeah, that is the 10 core skill sets.
That was amazing. 10 core skill sets. I'm going to give that the title right there. We'll definitely be adding that for sure to our notes. So, one thing as I hear you going through these, they are quite different, that you should be able to at least cross off 3 or 4, I would say right away, and then have a couple that you have to think about, and then probably a couple that jump off the page. At least that's how it was for me. When I look at it, I love technology, but it's not a natural gift. So it's an interest of mine. Like, I love being able to use all these smart devices that I have on, and but I don't know. I know the inner workings from a conceptual standpoint, an overview, but not the really nuts and bolts of it. Beauty, I can appreciate that, but certainly I'm not even someone that plays any music. So that's probably not, one of mine.
You don't look like a makeup artist either. Like,
no,
I've heard your stories.
No, that's right. No makeup here. Nothing fancy at all. Like, I'm brass tacks kind of person for sure. Numbers, I love math. Like, that's a big part of it, but that is not That's not the gift, because I've worked with, billionaire CEOs of hedge funds. Like that's numbers. Like that's just a different level. Coordination, I'm not, and a project manager. I'm a higher, meaning like a visionary. And I don't even love using that word because it sounds so like egotistical, but I love creating a vision for what I want the world to be, for what I want our team to be, and who I want myself to be, my family to be. So I definitely am part of that vision. I love that. I would spend a lot of my time doing that. However, doing that does not actually equal anything, because there has to be some type of action. That's how I typically see it. So the building I like, but for me, I'm kind of I would say, analysis and speaking, or analysis and words.
Yeah.
And the reason is that I love problem solving. So you can lock me in a room for 12 hours. I might stay in there for 24 and not go to bed, because if you give me a problem, I'm going to solve it. Like I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm going to figure it out. And even if it's in math, and that's not my absolute core concept, I'll research on how to figure that out. So I do love that. That's just a personal passion. And of course, I've just translated that towards health. And we work on some of the most complicated mystery-based illnesses out there. And by running labs, we're able to figure that out. But the way that I do that then is through speaking. And, I wouldn't be who I am without teaching. So I don't even consider myself a doctor. I consider myself a teacher. I love to teach my private wellness clients. I love to teach all the different doctors and health practitioners that I teach myself. So yeah, that was a fun exercise. And I can actually see where my daughters would fall. They're 6 and 8 years old, where my wife would fall. And it's different than me. So would you have guessed I was the analysis and words person?
The more you spoke, I was so glad you were kind of outlining this for everybody listening, because you were doing exactly what people do, but because we've had this conversation, you were asking the additional question of like, well, is this actually a skill set? And I think that question saves people years of pain in their career. And that's why I wrote my book and I put my work out there, because I think you being able to say, well, I'm super into technology, that's where people stop, and that's where people get stuck. Oh, I'm going to go work for Oura Ring. And it's like, yeah, but that's the backdrop. I love travel and 5-star hotels, but if you put me in the kitchen as a chef, like it's going to be catastrophic. So,
right. So you can enjoy them, but not have be that. Cause I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
I'm not a computer scientist. I appreciate that. I understand how it works from a higher level, but not, again, like you said, if you put me on the inside of one of these technology-based companies, I would stop enjoying it. And that would be, not ideal, because now I get to teach about it, but I don't have to be in the thing. That's not my core competency. So would you say it's something that comes naturally to you that you don't have to work at?
Yeah, and so I love, if you don't feel clear on what your core skill set is, which I'm sure some people, like you said, most people are going to have at least 2 or 3 jump through the page. Ask a few people in your life this question. Ask them, when have you seen me at my best? Mm-hmm. And if you want to be more specific, when have you seen me at my best in my work or in my career? Ask a couple colleagues you're comfortable with. Ask your parents. They're always kind of a trip to ask, because either your parents totally know you, or I do find that a lot of people feel like their parents actually don't know them, because there's so many different thoughts, insights, and ways we see the world and be that are separate from our parents. Mm-hmm. And then a couple good friends. I think that's pretty good, simple, random sample to ask. And I like to text the question, because I like to read what people say and really think about it. And then ask yourself, what core skill sets am I using? Is this a good person to be able to give me this kind of feedback? And what does that mean about me? But words and analysis for you make complete sense. I listened to your episode about COVID before we recorded this episode. And, just to get even more of a sense of you. And I was actually noticing that I've listened to a lot of different medical health-based shows, but you were, the fact that you do a backslash with the episode number and you put the medical journals and stuff like that, there's a diligence to somebody who has the analysis skill set, or if you were your own person doing all of that, I would wonder if you had the coordination core skill set, even though you're saying you don't, if you resided in that and kept that going in your business, like, oh, I do this and I do that. Usually the coordination people, you're going to hear them with all of the little details they have their hands in. It almost gives me anxiety because I'm so incapable at that compared to them. But yes, I do think that people are often a couple millimeters off. And it's really important to realize maybe you are working in the right core skill set, but there's two dynamics in your career at any time. And I think this is really the crux of the work that I do. There's the what of your career. That's your core skill set. That's where fulfillment is. Do you need to be in the right backdrop? So for you, medical is a backdrop. That's like the context of how you're using your skills. Yeah, that helps. But I would argue that if you didn't have this whole career ahead of you and you went into technology and you were given the opportunity to practice words or analysis or, both, you would probably have some level of fulfillment because you'd probably be thriving, making a difference. So even though you are really where you're meant to be, we're very complex organisms. We're moving, we're changing. Purpose moves. Who we are moves. Like, in the same way a snake sheds its skin, we kind of change, especially as entrepreneurs. Our services change as we do. As humans, our conversations change. But these two dynamics I see are the what, which is your core skill set, and then the how. The how has to do with how it all looks. So that comes back to your core values. So there's a lot of people who really value balance, or in your situation, wellness, well-being. If you really truly value wellness, where even though you talk about it, so you like it as a topic, but if you value it, you're going to be super unhappy if you're working like 85 hours a week or something insane. If wellness or balance is a core value for you, and then yet it depends what that means for you. Does balance mean you go hard for a week and then you do nothing the next week? Like everybody has a different definition, but the point being, if somebody values integrity and they have to, and their skill set is words and they love selling and they're an extrovert and that's such a fit for them. And the backdrop of what they're doing, their interest is sports and they're like selling something in the sports world and they're so excited about it. But their core value is integrity, and the product they have to sell forces them to lie on the phone or forces them to fake interest in it. It's violating one of their core values. And that, in the same way, working outside of your core skill set depletes you. Having a trespass on one of your core values will also deplete you. If you value, and that's kind of why I love the wellness one or balance one, because I think a lot of people are working an amount of hours where it's like, the mistake they make is they say, I need to throw away this whole job. This is the wrong job. No, maybe it's not. Maybe you're not working in the right environment. And so, given that we know 50% of people leave their job simply because they don't like their boss, what we know is that how your job looks, how your business looks, who you work with, it matters just as much as what you do. What you do matters in the long term the most because you're harnessing and growing and sharpening a core skill set. But how it looks matters for your well-being and your fulfillment.
Yeah, I 100% agree because, I've worked many jobs in the past in high school and through college that I didn't love, but I needed to be able to pay for school. For college, like that's just the way that it is. But it's also good perspective because I learned a lot of what I didn't want to do. I didn't think about it from the same angle that we're looking at it right now. But my story is I got really sick when I was 17, and I won't go through it because my audience knows the story, but that thrust me into the wellness-based sphere because I lived in it for 10 years trying to crack this code, trying to solve the puzzle, and I was not able to. And then I was given essentially, like the cheat code to figure out like, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you figure it out. And from then I simply wanted to be able to teach it to everyone. But I do agree that the skill sets that you're born with, mine might be a problem-solving analysis with some type of words, speaking wise. And I've written books in the past, but I prefer to speak rather than write. And so words would just be that part of it because I'm an external processor, and that's just by nature. So the way that I work out a problem is by speaking. My wife makes fun of me all the time because I talk to myself. She can hear me in the shower just talking to myself. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I didn't even know I was talking out loud. I was like, I was just working through some things that I had to do. And so, but it could be in a different field. However, my life led me to this. And of course, I'm very grateful for that. But it also enables me to work 10 hours a day. I used to work 12 hours or 14 hours a day. No problem. Because I was doing what I loved to do. And so I would have done it whether it was my job or not, because I love what I was doing. And so like what you talked about with energy, if you're doing it and time is just flying by, you're in your zone. Like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, and you're actually, again, kind of an exception, which is you grew up with a deep sense of mission through your own pain. We all have different pains in our life, like being sick at 17 and having to figure it out. That's huge. And not everybody had anything that life shifting,
It's true.
which I guess is good news and bad news, depending
That's
on
right.
how we all look at it. Right. And so I think for some people who kind of, had a normal, whatever life that means to them, it's like there wasn't that defining moment. So your context, your backdrop was pretty predetermined based on a deep sense of mission and purpose.
Yes.
I think fulfillment still lies in your skill set, because I don't care how interested somebody is in healing the world. If you don't have a skill set that lets you do that, it's like, that's why stuff just doesn't take off, like no matter how moved I was by reading, I was a little bookworm as a kid and I still am. It's like I've naturally had a gift for words. My first job was at a preschool, working in as an assistant in helping the chef prepare meals for all the little preschoolers, just whatever I could make money on in my summer job. And I would always find typos in the flyers. And at like 15, 16, I'd be like, there's a typo in your flyer up front. And they always called me the eagle eye. And it was like, your core skill set when you can't help but turn the job into it. You can have me flipping burgers at In-N-Out Burger, which is so delicious. And you're going to find me like somehow using words. They're going to use me for it because I just default to it. And the pain about it is it's so obvious for us. Like it's so easy for, what we're easy or what we're good at to feel easy. It's not easy and obvious for other people. And so I think that's part of the mindset block with it.
Yeah, that's really great. I love the word default there. What's your default? What do you go back to? Because it does make your life easier when you go to your default. And so that might be another one to look at. One quote I wanted to bring up that I absolutely love, this was in one of your videos. It says that realists are dreamers that had their hearts broken somewhere along the way. And I really love that because, I always say that, I'm more of an idealist. I want to shoot for an ideal. And I don't love when people say, well, I'm a realist. Like that can't happen. I'm like, what happened? Like, why do you believe that? And so sometimes I feel like believe me, I didn't believe in much. And I was pretty bleak from the age of around 17 to, I would say, 26, because I just kept relapsing over and over. So I was like, oh, I'm getting better. And then relapse. And I would get pneumonia and all sorts of sinus infections and you name it. So listen, I get that. But like the small wins then along the way started to build some confidence. And I'm like, well, I did that. I did this. Maybe I could do the next thing. But explain that quote a little bit more. Realists are dreamers that had their hearts broken somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love what you just said about how you start getting confidence through keeping promises to yourself or executing on something in the field of psychology. And for me, I ended up after having a master's in national security and counterterrorism. There must be a causal relationship here because then I got a master's in spiritual psychology. So clearly I was having a meltdown and just was
swung the pendulum.
Yeah, the pendulum definitely swung with my master's degrees. But one of the fundamentals we learned in psychology is that if you want to build confidence, create commitments and honor them with yourself. Another thing that hurts confidence is if you have what they call incomplete cycles of action, meaning if you have a stack of books on your book stand that you're never going to get to, put them away because it lowers your confidence. It's a version of you saying, I'm going to get to these and that's why they deserve to be right here in my face. But subconsciously you're showing yourself you haven't done it and it lowers your confidence. So it's another reason why we shouldn't have to-do list. There's always that lingering weird thing on our to-do list that we don't want to do.
Right.
It's so important to either get it done or take it away because it hurts your confidence. So I love that you gave that example. But as far as that quote goes around realists, I do think that we are taught to be realistic and practical, whatever that means, because it hurts to put yourself out there. It's so painful. And, I think in society, there are concepts that are woven throughout our social discourse, like waiting for the shoe to drop. Don't hold your breath. Don't get your hopes up. We say these things. We hear these things. They are woven in the fabric of our communication, and hence they're woven in our culture and in our mindset. And so it's so important to start to notice, why don't you think you're worthy of that thing? Because whatever that is for you, because somebody is out there doing it who is just as qualified or not qualified as you. And the only difference between you and them is that they thought it was available and they didn't want to call themselves that practical realist. So I think your quality of life is directly tied to what you think is on tap for you, what you think is available for you. And, why? It's just common sense. Why would somebody pursue something they don't think they can have? Like, it just feels crazy. That feels crazy. Like, I'm not going to go try to be the Queen of England tomorrow if I just don't think that's on availability for me. So I've had to do a lot of mindset work. And I think a lot of people who get really hurt call themselves realistic as a way to hide behind ever having to vulnerably put themselves out there. And, one of my favorite concepts from a book I recently read around authenticity was how important it is to be authentic, because it gets straight to the matter in business, in life. When you're with somebody who's not authentic, you need to look at your watch and accept the fact that you're about to calculate hours of your time trying to cut through them so that you can finally get to the point of whatever you're actually talking about. It's like, I don't know, so many people, have you ever been around somebody who you say, how are you doing? And they look clearly in distress and they tell you they're great. And it's like, oh, this is going to be a really tough relationship because now I have to like pretend with them.
Yes.
And I think we're doing that with ourselves when we call ourselves realists.
Well, I think authenticity is just one of the biggest factors. It's just because I look at a lot through the eyes of the nervous system, which is just something that we specialize in. What we talk about is that everything is energy. So if you're not authentic, it takes so much more energy to live your life. Where if you're authentic and you're authentically you're not trying to hurt. Some people use I'm just being authentic as a way, as almost an out to hurt other people. Like, no, that's not authentic. That's just mean, So like authentic is you living your life, who you are, being true to yourself, but you have to know yourself first. Like you talk about in your book, which we'll get to in just a moment, U-turn is like, you need to do a self-audit. You need to know who you are. And it doesn't mean that hurting anybody along the way, but it just means that being true to yourself, like being true, I think is a good word for it. And so I think, again, that's the thing is, if you meet me in person, I sound exactly the same. I talk exactly the same. With my team, I'm exactly the same. Sometimes I fly off the handle and rant with my team. Sometimes I fly off the handle and rant on my podcast. When it's all over, I'm like, whoa, I don't know what just happened there. Hey, I apologize. Like right away, I just get back to I don't know what that was. I just had to get it out. I'm good now. You good? Okay, let's move. But I'm being authentic to myself, who I am. And I'm okay with it. Now, if I find something though, I'm like, that's inappropriate. You shouldn't, you need to work on that. That's something I need to work on that. But again, it's figuring out, I think, a lot about myself, which comes from the self-awareness. And the more positions I put myself in over the years, I realize more about myself. Like if I never challenge myself, I don't learn too much about myself. And I think that that's really important as well. And I'll let you add a thought to that, but I do want to ask one more question. So I want to make sure that we get to it. And that was, what do you give this specific quote, and I don't know enough about it, so I'd love a little bit more context around it, because this was a big way that you help people change. What do you know that you wish you didn't? Yeah. I had a little trouble understanding that, so I'd love you to be able to clarify. And when do you use this? So let's put that in context.
Well, kind of talking about the self-audit, there's a lot of things that we know somewhere in the corners of our psyche that we wish wasn't true, and we are not going to say it out loud. And my desire to ask this question, not only in my book, U-Turn, which for anybody listening, it's YO U-Turn, is to get you, that's the concept of making a U-turn. It's coming home to yourself. I think far too often we turn around when our career doesn't make sense, kind of like somebody driving in a car, like a regular U-turn. And I wanted to make a YO U-turn of, can you come back to you? And so I think the question of what do you know that you wish you didn't know, it forces people into a level of radical honesty with themselves that they may have never been willing to have. I would argue that somebody listening to this episode right now, if they ask themselves, what do I know that I wish wasn't true or that I didn't know, that they would probably say, well, I know my relationship isn't working anymore and we've changed. Or I know that for example, I actually just got diagnosed with Lyme disease just a few weeks ago. And for years, I didn't have that many symptoms, but it was like this weird, intuitive, I don't know, I just knew there was something, even though I felt like pretty much more energetic than everybody I know. And finally, for no reason other than my intuition, I said, hey, can I get a Lyme test? And I tested positive. So my point being, I think my wish for anyone would be not to change their life when what you are ignoring is so loud that life hits you with a 2x4 and forces you to know what you already knew, but that you didn't want to accept. I think it's very much the case with health. A lot of people feel like a lump in their breast or something like that. And they just think, oh, this is fine. But somewhere in the corner of their psyche, they're like, maybe it's not. And so this question is really the start for life and for careers in the work that I do. And in my book and in my podcast, I ask it all the time because our life is moving, we're changing, and what we know to be true is evolving at all times. And this kind of goes back to you talking about being experimental and changing as a person. It reminds me of my relationship with my partner. Like, first 8 months was like a honeymoon. And then the next year was like a power struggle, like moving in together, getting a dog, COVID, like figuring out who we are together. All of that stuff felt invisible at the beginning. And now we're in this really fun space where we know how to navigate each other. We have a really good relationship. And I think that is really the case with ourselves in our career. And what robs us of truly getting to know ourselves is that we don't accept what we know that we wish we didn't know. We don't look at what we know that we wish we didn't know. What I knew that I wish I didn't know at the Pentagon was that it wasn't right for me. And it took me a year to accept that and to get into motion about it. And a year's pretty quick. Some people know what they wish they didn't know about their career for 10 years. And then one day it's so miserable that they literally can't do it anymore. And that's why we see divorce, illness, midlife crisis, whatever we see. Sometimes it's a little whisper, and I love the people who do that. But just like Thoreau says, most men, or I would argue women, are living lives of silent desperation. I think that's just the truth.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that can lead to illness in and of itself. And I know for myself, and I've kind of mentioned it just, a little bit in the background, but never really came out and said it. But, for 10 years, it was actually a little bit more than that. Let's say 12 years, from around 25, 26 years old till about 37. I was running major, large practices in Boston, doing over 20,000 appointments a year.
Wow.
But I wasn't really happy. But I enjoyed my work. I loved my work. I was definitely living my purpose, but I am not a coordinator, manager, project manager, any of those things. I know, we just went through my skill set. So I loved helping people. There's no doubt about it. And I even love building teams. I love giving people the opportunity to be on a team, to gain employment, all of those things. But for me, I realized that it was very stressful to me, to do HR, human resources, to oversee people. And that just sapped my energy, without a doubt. For me, that, where other people love it. So I have Equal Life, I have Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, and then I have my own personal podcast, type company. Each one of those companies now have a director of operations. They have someone that runs the entire show so that it allows me to stay within my core set, because my core set is not everything. A lot of people, I think, look at certain people, they'll look at you and say, well, she's able to do everything. But the problem is, I'm sure that you know who you need to hire and go to do those specific things. And my life became infinitely less stressful and more enjoyable once I put the people whose core skill sets were operations in those particular roles. So I just wanted to share that with people, just letting them know that again, I've always been grateful for all the different steps along the way. But for me, until I stepped into that next role, it wasn't as fulfilling as it could have been and should have been.
I love what you're saying, because there's really a distinction that we can make from what you're saying. And it's the distinction between, I don't know, how do I want to say this? It's like when you're being someone that you're not and you're forced to do that, all of your energy goes out the window. And so it sounds like you have really calibrated around who you are and what you're interested in. Mm-hmm. And now you're there. And the distinction I really want to reveal here is around how to fix something, because a lot of people feel disconnected and they're like, I want to fix something. Here's how you fix it. You either add something or remove something. And the problem is that most of us think we need to add something. This isn't working, so I need to go get that. We're in a society society of more, buy things, busyness is a badge of honor. Like this seems to be the thinking that we have. And I love the feedback that we're hearing here, that you were doing all of the HR work and you kind of realize, I don't like this. And that's enough to zap no matter what core skill set you have. If you're doing it, 30% of the time and 80% of the time, or whatever it is, you're doing HR, that's going to kill whatever you're doing. Who cares how much you love it? So that's an issue of having to remove something. And so I would leave anyone who wants to simplify their life, even if they're not taking all of this career advice on this episode, even if they don't read my book or whatever, I would lead them to say, what can I remove from my life to make things better today? Because usually it can be that simple.
No, and just to add one point to that is that I would do exactly what I was doing, living my purpose. I would see people for 8 hours a day and I'd be energized, feeling great. Like that was a great day. Look at all these different people. Like I know this person's going to see the results. And then I would step out of my office at the end of the day and my front desk manager would be like, hey, we've got a broken piece of equipment here. This person's going to be late 15 minutes. And those aren't major things, but that would ruin my entire day. Yeah. So I would also have people look at like, what are those little things that, ruin your entire day that aren't major things? That's the how, exactly.
Yeah, the what versus the how. You had some issues, and you actually had some issues with both. The what is like you were coordinating, and the how was like how your team was being run, like how things were getting handled. Like you don't even want to hear about those things because you're giving all of yourself to where you really have purpose. And it sounds like you're very experimental. And that is one of my biggest messages in my work is hold your career more lightly. People are holding it too heavily. They're treating every decision as if it's a marriage, which I hate to say, divorce exists and I don't recommend it, but still, everything is undoable. Everything is changeable. And I think it's really important to remember that with your career. And I love how experimental I hear that you were.
That's great. I mean, life it's meant to be a daring journey. In my opinion, you'll have some fun, you'll have some highs, you'll have some lows, but you should at least enjoy the ride along the way. So love being able to chat with you today. Your book, U-Turn, just debuted in January. So I look forward to hearing all the different comments from people that have read it and all the people that will go out and grab a copy. Like you said, that is Y-O-U-Turn. I'll link it up though today in the show notes. Your podcast though, tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm going to ask you so many questions about health and my listeners are going to love you. It's called the U-Turn Podcast. So 2 words, Y-O-U-Turn, just like my book. And it's really a place to elevate your mindset and work and love. We have so many transformational experts who are talking about love from a research-backed standpoint and also just from personal development tools. I like to think of every episode as a little mini masterclass where people can take notes and actually implement something very different from the episode. In the same way I talk about the 10 core skill sets or all of these different concepts, that's what I really strive for in my show. So I'm really excited to have you.
Amazing. I can definitely recommend that. Your main website is ashleystahl.com, which I will link that up. And that's Stahl, it's Stahl. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we'll make sure we link that up. Well, like I said, a great pleasure being able to have you on. I'm really glad to be connected with you and look forward to being able to do a round 2 in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. And I have something exciting to share with you. Every quarter, just like every single natural health method and modality has taught, we do a functional medicine detox. We do a seasonal detox. So whether you're studying Ayurvedic medicine, bioregulatory medicine, orthomolecular, any of the natural health modalities, you learn that the body needs to always be going through a subtractive process in order to maintain health. That means we need to take out the toxins, take out the bad, and rest the body for a period of time without always adding more. So what we do is we actually blend ancient Ayurvedic principles with state-of-the-art orthomolecular and functional medicine. And that is with our quarterly functional medicine detox. Every single quarter, every 12 weeks with the seasons, we have thousands of people from around the world join us for this functional medicine detox. I've been doing this now for over a decade in my private practice, and I can tell you this, it is the number one thing that I do for myself to work on that aging-based process and everyone in our private practice. And that is because it looks at your body from a holistic standpoint. It is a whole body reset. It doesn't say, oh, go work on autoimmune diseases, go work on blood sugar. No, it actually works on the body from a systemic level. It's working on balancing healthy levels of hormones, healthy levels of inflammation, healthy levels of estrogen dominance, or healthy levels of blood sugar levels. And what it's doing is it's actually going in and scavenging all sorts of bacteria and things that should not be there in your body during that period of rest. And again, it's very scientifically proven and by the book to increase what's called autophagy. It's this cleaning process of the body. It actually is so profound. In 2016, I wrote about this in my book. It won the Nobel Prize in medicine, and that's in oncology and cancer-based work through this process of specific fasting, which we use in this functional medicine detox. So I could go on and on. If you don't know anything about a functional medicine detox, I've actually created a completely free course for you, and that's at equi.life. That's equi.life/detox-course. And this week, if you purchase a functional medicine detox and join us April 5th, now you could do yours before or after, that's okay, but we'll be doing it the week of April 5th. And this is our spring detox. Anyone that purchases a functional medicine detox over at Equilife, we are going to give you a complimentary bottle of our gluten and dairy support. This is a specific enzyme that can be used with not just gluten and wheat-based meals or dairy to help you digest those particular products better, but also used with beans and other vegan-based proteins. It's phenomenal at helping to digest those as well. So this is completely free, a $39.95 value, yours free with any purchase of our 7, 14, or 21-day detox. For anyone, if this is your first functional medicine detox and there are health issues that you do want to work on, or you're looking to lose weight the healthy way, I can't recommend it enough, that 21-day detox to start. It can be absolutely life-changing. I look forward to joining you myself April 5th, and of course, while supplies last, grab your free gluten and dairy support enzyme at equi.life. Take care, everyone.